Okay, so when you think of Silicon Valley, you think of natural beauty, venture capital, crazy housing prices, and the most successful and innovative tech movement in the history of the world. That's our reputation, right? Well, guess what else we have? Transnational cartel operations. Truly. Violent criminal cartels poisoning the environment are right in our backyard, even in this county. In 2004, tonight's speaker stumbled into a terribly toxic marijuana grow site that would change the trajectory of his career. Born and raised in Silicon Valley in a military family of conservationists, Lieutenant Norris was taught to love nature. He went from being a fish and game warden, protecting wildlife and preserving waterways, to being a leader in dismantling the operations of transnational criminals. John's books, War in the Woods, and most recently, Hidden War, read like action thrillers and give us a window into the complex operations of fighting dangerous criminals hiding in rural America, right in our backyard. He takes us with him as they sneak up on well-funded, well-armed criminals taking advantage of our freedom, porous borders, and understaffed law enforcement organizations. Can you imagine? What distinguishes him could certainly be his tactical, strategic, and organizational skills. But what strikes us most is this. He saw a problem and took responsibility to find a solution, the model of which is being used around the country today. We are honored to have one of the Thin Green Line's finest with us tonight, so please help me welcome to the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley, Lieutenant John Norris.
Silicon Valley Forum, how we doing? Well, that was quite an intro, and it's such an honor to be here tonight. I want to thank Danny Gonzalez, who's here. He actually bridged this gap. I'm doing a lot with his group right now. And that introduction gave the basics. This is very special for two reasons to talk to you guys tonight here, because this is literally ground zero for me where it started. Like my introduction said, I started my life, grew up here in the Silicon Valley, was on the ranches, was in Henrico State Park, was in the outdoors as much as possible growing up, coming from a conservation family. When I became a game warden, I wanted to come back home. And I was very fortunate to do my first 3 years of my career. I'm going to date myself a little bit, fresh out of the academy, 92 to 95. I'm in Riverside County, and then I get to come up here to the Gilroy position and basically work all over Santa Clara County. I would promote to lieutenant many years later and have 2.5 counties, Santa Cruz, San Benito, part of Monterey, and Santa Clara County. And when I got into the profession of being a game warden, I just wanted to chase poachers, right? What people traditionally think game wardens do. We go after people that take fish that are undersized, they take too many deer, maybe they spotlight deer at night illegally, take things out of season, they pollute streams, we do oil spills, stream alteration. And the one that's just near and dear to me is educating the next generation, children, on conservation, the outdoors, through hunter education. If you had told me that in the middle of my career, starting in 2004, and especially in 2005, but if you would have told me then that I would be battling the drug cartels out of Mexico, not only with allied agency special operators of law enforcement from the sheriff's office, but doing that as a full-time job as a game warden, I would have told you you were ingesting the toxically tainted black market weed and going nutty that these guys produce. But sure enough, that's what happened. In 2004, as the intro stated, I had a really good friend here working on his master's thesis that I grew up with. He finds a dried up stream on the Paliso Ranch down in South Santa Clara County that trickles right out of Henrico State Park. It's in April. Steelhead fish are dead. They're migrating. Red-legged, yellow-legged frog, all these threatened endangered species should be thriving. So what do? I throw them in the truck. I take them up to the top of the mountain. We dive down into the canyon to go see what's going on. We suspect what I would see a lot as a game warden at the time, one property owner stealing water from another, whether it's for agriculture, whether it's for drinking, whatever the case may be. And then we stumbled on the first cartel grow that pretty much changed my life. And boy, that was a real pucker factor day, let me tell you. When we followed a water diversion a couple hundred yards down a very pristine channel, no radio service, no cell service, we are cut off, and then I see those first two growers. And they definitely are not from America. I could tell from their culture, their culture, how they looked. I could also tell from the green battle dress uniforms they were wearing, AK-47 guns, machetes, as they're creeping down the trail on this ranch with tactical awareness. Dead silent. They've got a grove of about 7,000 plants. We're starting to see plants as we're maneuvering our way toward them. And then we're hiding, fortunately, and not detected, and get out of that spot, realizing that we have a major problem. I was literally 15 yards from these individuals with my rifle trained on them in the event it got deadly, and thankfully we were not detected. That would have been a very interesting day with an unarmed civilian with me, a biologist and a friend I've known since second grade, of explaining what was happening that day to my superiors. Fast forward, we would raid that grow about a month later. I would meet the sheriff's deputies. I would meet DEA, narcotics task force groups that I was not used to working with as a game warden, and we would be the guides and the bird dogs from the game warden side to get them into that grow site. And we would go with 20 to 30 officers that day and raid this thing. We didn't catch anybody that day. We eradicated 7,000 plants, and then the helicopter got called in from Moffett Field. Here comes a Pavehawk Black Hawk helicopter. I'm going to take my first hoist ride into a military ship, which was an e-ticket fun day. No doubt about that. That's not an everyday occurrence. But as before we were hoisting out of there, I asked the task force leader of the narcotics group, I said, well, wait a minute. We took out all these plants, man, but there's like a water diversion. This creek is dry. There's a dam impoundment up here. I'm seeing like fertilizers. There's human excrement in the creek. There's all this infrastructure. These guys have been living here for months, maybe years. And the response I got was, that's not our job. We don't clean up garbage. We just got to get these plants and we're out of here. Everybody did a good job, and we left. Obviously, from a game warden's perspective, from a conservation, our biggest thing is on the thin green line of conservation, protecting the precious 3 Ws, wildlife, waterways, and wildlands. And that was absolutely one of those things where I had to just bite my tongue and be quiet. It wasn't my operation, but I now knew we had another environmental criminal that was the most savage and vicious I've ever seen. I didn't know until later on that these were Sinaloa cartel members embedded in America, vetted in America, tactically trained, very good at growing clandestine marijuana. We would later learn about the prohibited EPA neurotoxin poisons and insecticides they put on these plants that go out to the public, they dry invisible, and millions of American consumers, from children to adults, were consuming this marijuana with nerve agents on it. 2005, August 5th, a day I will never forget, because that was the day that truly changed a lot of our lives from the standpoint of our profession, when we were in the Los Gatos foothills helping the sheriff's department on a raid of approximately 10,000 plants, and that's when we were ambushed by an AK-47 armed grower in the middle of harvest time, and my young warden partner took an AK-47 round through both legs. One shot as we're moving through the grow. Gunfire is going off to my right as I hear the sheriff's deputies engaging a suspect ahead of me that I can't see. Unbeknownst to me, that suspect had a sawed-off shotgun at 5 to 7 yards in front of me through thick brush, full of buckshot, trained on me and another young game warden. Fortunately, by the good graces, my partner forever and brother in life, as far as doing operations from the sheriff's office, was able to get rid of that threat before I'm not here talking to you guys tonight. And I ended up having to engage a suspect that had shot my partner near fatally. By the good graces, that officer survived. We left the area, and we now knew we had the biggest, most dangerous environmental criminal that I think game wardens have ever faced. And it was in my backyard, and it was at home, so it was very personal. I'm going to show a quick video that's kind of an overview, guys. We use this for a trailer to my new book, the second edition of Hidden More, when it dropped, but it gives a visual of some things. And then we're going to go into what these cartels are doing nationally, not just on the environmental front with cannabis, but all the other heinous crimes they're doing, what the new administration has defined these groups as, thankfully, something I've been pushing for 15 years now, and give everybody a little bit of, really, really graphic visuals of what is out there so we can be aware and we can continue the fight to take what I consider a #1 priority of domestic terrorists here in our great nation. That's just an overview of some of the threats we're fighting, and they have escalated, especially in the last 5 years. The inter-border cartel threats, this is on the southern border during the COVID years. I was down there doing a lot of work with Border Patrol. We were filming documentaries, and one thing the cartels like is they like when the world's in chaos. They thrive where we shut down, and we do really weird things politically, as California exemplified that during the lockdowns. And the cartel goes, hey man, that's open no lines at Disneyland. Nobody's paying attention. So they flooded the marijuana issue, bringing in stuff from the across the border, as well as continuing to get into our public lands and on private ranches. I want to say it's really good to see some old friends that I've known forever in the cattle industry and agriculture here, and a lot of new friends I've met over at the book table as we're getting started. So when I leave tonight, or when we finish the presentation, you'll have my contact information. I want you to stay in touch as needed as we move forward, especially legislatively on some of this stuff for the states that need it besides California, because we're looking at this nationally now. Anyway. COVID era, some mules here trafficking people, trafficking fentanyl, bringing meth-amphetamine, as well as toxically tainted marijuana across the border then. The tunnels, there have been documented over 300 of these tunnels since the early 90s. Some of them are a mile long. We're still finding these even with a hard southern border secure lockdown. They're popping up in San Diego in houses. They're all the way over across the border a mile. So a very efficient way for these guys to get contraband and agents and people across the border. You might have seen some of the footage of the cartel panga boats as things really changed with the latest administration on taking out some of these drug smugglers, and you might, hint, hint, see a video at the end of this presentation of something that's started in a good way. One-way boats from Mexico built with very high-dollar four-stroke motors made to go really fast, look like the ocean, bring up to 6,000 pounds of contraband, whether it's marijuana, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and as we see, just people. Getting operatives that can do a lot of damage, that can run grow houses, they can run fentanyl trafficking and human trafficking rings, and at the same time, terrorist events. We know through the last administration, and especially through the lockdown years, no less than 200 international terrorists on the watch list made it across, and they are here. And I think many of us in the room know that, and they can activate. So these boats are really good for getting those people into our great nation. Border infiltration has slowed down considerably, as we all probably know, on the southern border because it's been so locked up under the second term of President Trump. This was during COVID action when ramps to get over the border, that's a 63-second ordeal to get that Jeep over by smugglers. That was mind-blowing when we were privy to that with the law enforcement agents down there, as well as a lot of drugs and a lot of cannabis there in that picture on the right. I may talk a little fast because this is kind of a very in-depth presentation that goes a little longer than 45 minutes, so if I sound like Alvin the Chipmunk, please bear with me. What are we seeing in these grow sites that affect all of us, especially of us on the conservation thin green line front that just want to see what Silicon Valley epitomizes, what our natural parks, national and state parks epitomize? And I now live full-time in Montana, where it's millions of wide open acres. We don't have a lot of this wildlife, wildland, waterway destruction from the cartel side because of weather and just because how that state is wired. But what I can say is spending 30 to 40% of my year here in California and knowing how precious the resources are and how diverse they are in the Golden State, this is still home. So I'm dedicated to protecting it and using California's example for the rest of the nation as we continue this environmental and public safety fight. These pesticides and fertilizers are very dangerous, deadly. I'm going to show some of the pictures of what they are, why they've been banned by the EPA, why they're felonies to possess, and why the cartels use them on things like cannabis to keep everything, animals, insects, rodents, whatever, off the plants. That is our marijuana enforcement team. That's the team I was very blessed and challenged to develop before I retired. In 2013, I approached our new Chief of Patrol, Mike Carrion, who was one of my mentors in the academy, and then through my training and teaching career over 3 decades. And even though it wasn't really politically correct to have this type of team in California at the time, people are like, what are these game wardens going to do? That's not a game warden. That looks like a military special ops guy or a SWAT guy or a SEAL team guy. Who is that? Well, this is what it became. I mean, we were up to 6 gunfights now, officer-involved shootings, with my partner getting near killed in the first one I just described in 2005. And we weren't using dogs in the early days, and having the stars of that team and that show right there are those two Belgian Malinois, those fur missiles that are lifesavers exponentially. I know we got some dog lovers in the room, whether you have them as pets, you have them to run your cattle ranches, you have them to detect contraband, or even to apprehend and bite a suspect that wants to do major harm to you and your partners in the field. Those dogs are lifesavers. And we've lost some of those dogs. I'll tell some of those stories, and they're like losing a two-legged partner. But man, they have kept us alive, and they're continuing to keep my partners alive that are still operating 7 years into my post-operational career now. We were designed to work on water, training our patrol boats off the coast of Southern California, because what are our patrol boats, our big vessels that can go 100 miles offshore, or our small skiffs during a lobster opener or a salmon opener? What are they running into? They're running into party boats and fishing boats that are run by cartel traffickers disguised to look like they belong. And our guys aren't equipped for that. I mean, very, very dangerous. But we'll get into that a little more as we go. Helicopters, working with Moffett Field and the Pavehawks and the 129th and the Special Forces and the PJs, was a breath of fresh air when we discovered we had that resource to fight this fight. They get us in and out of grows, or especially get us out of a grow after we've done a 20-hour operation of sneaking in the middle of the night to try to apprehend these guys safely. Eradicate a grow, which is very arduous, very hot, a lot of work, obviously. And then what we had to do when we built this team is take a third component to the mission, which not everybody was really backing, because it was arduous, it took man hours, and it wasn't really fun, and it's really dirty, is cleaning up those grow sites. Restoring the waterways, taking out all the trash, getting rid of the diversions, trying to rectify the environmental damage, because 4,000 to 5,000 grows in California a year, and no reclamation was happening when we started this. Those are Superfund sites out, folks. They're continuing. That water is polluted. It's not going to stop being polluted with those poisons seeping in from that grow site if we don't clean it up. We're going to be on land anywhere. There's Canine Phoebe. We're going to tell a little dog story about her because she was phenomenal, not only historical, but I can personally say she saved my life at least 20 times, probably more, and hundreds of times for other officers besides our game wardens in our agency. This is after she had 2 apprehensions. We wouldn't take a picture with her with the Gatorade bottle celebrating on the front of a kayak if we were in danger, but she had a good day. She's a type A dog. She lived 13 years. She passed away in 2017 of leukemia after 116 apprehension bites and 900 arrests where she didn't have to bite. Most of those, right? Yeah, Canine Phoebe was something. She was something. And and she was the sweetest, kindest, gentlest dog when she wasn't working. Tummy pets, doing shoulder bumps, and wrestling with my little yellow lab who, my little yellow lab would never bite a cartel suspect. She'd say, "Let me just lick you. Let's talk it out. Put the knives and guns away. We don't have to fight this. Just everybody get along." But sometimes we can't do that. So this fur missile was so sweet and friendly until she had to go to work, and then she was all business. We were made to be deployable in any terrain, largely because California has it all from the eastern Sierras going up to almost 14,000 feet. We've had grows in Sierra Nevada, Bighorn sheep country, Golden Trout Wilderness area at 11, 12, 13,000 feet, and these guys have grows up there in that pristine level. Then all the way down to sea level and everywhere in between, especially here in the Central Coast. So wilderness area ops, getting on horses. There's a lot of wilderness areas throughout California that these cartels know they can exploit, and that's where the environment is so sensitive, being up so high, pristine alpine glacier-like water, and so they're impacting that water source at the highest level of purity. So we don't do it a lot, but if we have to get on horseback, if we have to bring in mules to get gear in where we can't run motorized vehicles, that training needed to be very essential for some operations. That's not what most of us do when we're rappelling down mountains. That's one of my young snipers at the time. He's now a lieutenant, great kid. But we're doing basically the mountaineering because we've had to do this on the eastern Sierras off cliffs to get onto a grow site. Our canines go where we go, and that's one of our new canines. Basically, she's a little tense, but she ended up, she relaxed, and when Nick right there, her operator and handler, took her down the second and third time, it was all smiles and, wagging lips and tongue out and all of that kind of stuff. So the aerial gunning we had to do a little bit of because cartels were being told to shoot at the camp helicopters when the sheriff's in LA, or we would have a helicopter go in to basically put us into grow sites. And they know if they shoot or even fire at one helicopter, the state's done using helicopters or doing operations for that part of the summer for the better part of weeks. So we train to deal with the threat on the ground or ground shooting at us. Fortunately, haven't had to use it. I mentioned offshore stuff. This was a target system built by my Met guys, aptly named the USS Weed. So they could shoot close in. They're simulating a skiff engagement where we come upon a cartel boat and our operators are just checking fishing licenses, looking for an over-limit of lobster, and now they're into a gunfight with some pretty bad people. So that kind of changed the game, working with our boat crews. I was very fortunate to develop the first sniper team for the agency within the Met umbrella called the Delta team. Here's two now retired captain and a lieutenant that were in the team after I left. Really, really good men. Shooting in swells, dealing with panga boat threats. But our snipers were essential and continue to be essential for all the high risk, very dangerous stuff that the Met team gets tasked with doing, not only on cartel operations in the woods, in homes and offshore, but helping high risk warrants for the rest of the agency. And our mission was to do private land, public land, trespass grows, take out that problem, and deal with anything else tactical that the department has had to deal with. Obviously, after 9/11, that really changed the game for really all law enforcement. Whether you're a rural game warden, a park ranger with state parks, or you're a San Jose PD merge operator, or you're working for DEA, we need a force multiplier to deal with another terrorism incident or more than one terrorism incident throughout the nation and be able to deal with whatever our public could be threatened on here in the Silicon Valley or anywhere throughout the country. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on with this cannabis. Even today now with private land becoming the dominant, public land is still being impacted. It's not just California. I consider Silicon Valley the best example of how pervasive this is everywhere, because when you think of the Silicon Valley, like our introduction started, this is the tech capital of the world. We got a lot of progression going on here. We got a lot of energy going on here, relatively low crime considering, and I had ground zero for these cartels working in the middle of my career. You know, we're talking 25 to 30 grow sites a summer, and those are just the ones we found. If it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. And since retirement, you'll see the things I've been doing throughout the nation that have really woken my eyes up to how pervasive this is and why, fortunately, we're finally treating this as a national priority and putting attention on it. A drop-off grow putting water lines in our eastern foothills here in San Jose. What's wrong with that? Who takes all that water line out of the woods? Another stash area, just giving you guys some ideas, some historical pictures, all from this area. Growers picked up on a Parks trail camera. You can see he's got felt on the bottom of his feet. They're gonna go in and dig a grow. This one was good. And I know my cattle families and cattlemen and cattlewomen, I just love this one. This was a grow that took us a couple years to find because we could smell it. Guys would say they'd hear things. We'd go on public land and private land on ranch overlap, and we'd see cattle tracks everywhere, and we'd follow what we thought might have been a person track, and we'd never find the grow. And then we caught a guy on another grow up in Northern California who had been working down in this area for a while, kind of like a journeyman, real good at what he does, so other plaza bosses use him, and these were in his backpack. So use some cattle hooves, get in around, to an area where cattle roam, and then just take them off where no one's tracking you and go another 2-3 miles, and good luck getting found if he's smart with his field craft. So catching these guys was quite a hunt. And the cat and mouse game constantly changes, it's constantly evolving. There's a terracing of the creek banks that you're gonna see environmentally. This is that Palisade grow where myself and GI, as he's called in my first book, War in the Woods, went face to face with that armed gunman and got out safely and changed the day. This is a perimeter camp right in Foothill Park, right above Stanford University of the Western Foothills. It ended up becoming one of the largest grow sites in Santa Clara County, 32,000 plants. It was in place for many years, heavily armed individuals. Kids were doing nature walks and science camp stuff all around this when we actually got onto this, and this blew me away. This hooch that was inside this camp, in Foothill Park, mind you, was so fortified when that door was closed, I almost walked right by it, 2 feet from it, and it looked like a wall of brush and rock. And when you manipulated some of the fauna and the cover there, you went into an elaborate quarters like that. You get into an elaborate kitchen that's been in there for years. We found some Glock pistols, we found some assault rifles. We caught some bad guys, but that was an eye-opener. That was literally in our backyard with kids and teachers and mentors walking the same trails these guys were, and by the good graces, there was no interaction between those groups. The grow site often well concealed. We see this all over the country, not just California. And then one not so well concealed, 16,000 plants back in Henrico State Park back in the day. And this is the first time I would see the collusion between the Chinese and the Asian gang members and the Mexican cartels, which we'll get into in a little bit. I want to talk about the mindset and why they're making so much money and why they feel so free to operate all over America, and that's patron saints. We're not going to disparage any deity here. We're not going to bash anybody's religion. That's not what we're doing. We're just trying to get into the mindset of what these cartels think they're doing and why they're doing it and why they feel so justified and blessed by their deities, the patron saints, to do so. This is an outdoor shrine between Ubis Reservoir and going up to the Santa Cruz Mountains. And this was in a grow site that took us many years to find. It had been in play for several years, literally a stone's throw from Morgan Hill, California, where I grew up. And we found this in the main camp when we assaulted it, cut into the side of the bank, and all these candles, Jesus Malverde, St. Jude, St. Romo, legitimate Catholic patron saints, right? But also some of the narco saints that are made up, Santa Muerte, El Nazario, the crazy one, Jesus Malverde. The idea being that this shrine right there is offering gifts for their blessed activity of making money how they need to, knowing that if they keep those candles burning 24 hours a day and they don't let the candle go out, they have an invisibility to law enforcement. They have an invisibility to ranchers or people living in rural areas to ever detect what they're doing because they're very blessed in their criminal activity. This is ingrained in that faith that they believe. And we need to understand that going into this, and we also need to understand when we find a suspect or a vehicle or a stash house that has a shrine that's a patron saint or a tattoo on somebody's body or something that, woven into, say, a belt buckle or something like that, that we know who we're dealing with and how dangerous it can be. These indoor shrines, this is down on the southern border, pretty creepy. They're sacrificing animals. There's been some human sacrifice stuff in the most savage groups. Cannibalism, no joke. Believing they get a lot more power. These are the more very aggressive, very violent criminal cells like Jalisco New Generation we're dealing with now. Pardon me for the graphic, I won't keep it up long. But obviously there's a Catholic spot, right, in a mausoleum type gravesite of St. Jude there, and then a rival cartel has basically taken out enemies and just basically desecrated a Catholic spot, which is pretty mind-blowing and horrible. We intercepted Biblia de la Santa Muerte. That's the Bible they have of Santa Muerte, the saint of death, that is worshipped not only by cartel members, but actually by non-cartel members. We learned a lot of intel from mindset that I just described. There's long 8-hour classes. I do a couple-hour class on this as well for law enforcement agencies. But again, it gets into the mindset of what we're dealing with and how justified and blessed and basically sanctioned these groups feel to do what they do throughout America. Let's talk about the pesticides real quick. These are found in most every grow site. They're found in the Chinese grow sites, in hoop houses, in greenhouses, not only in California, but about 25, 35 other states now. This is happening in the state of Maine now. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what we see in Siskiyou County and how when we regulated under Prop 64 and watered down the felony statute to a misdemeanor for an illegal grower, and an infraction statute for a juvenile grower, and make no mistake, I've come across a lot of aggressive 16, 17, 15-year-old young men that are coming up in the grow sites with guns that have fought us in our canines, and they're coming up in the organization, and now 6 plants or 6,000 plants, right now the way California law reads, a seatbelt ticket will probably cost you more on the infraction than him doing that activity. So they don't have to hide anymore. They're not just in the public lands and on the private ranches. They're hiding in plain sight in 2-track rural areas and communities, Siskiyou County, Shasta County, the foothills east and west of where we sit right now. Carbofuran is a nerve agent. It's an anticoagulant, and it's a felony to have in this country. EPA determined when they got their testing ability up and their data about 20 years ago that this stuff is so toxic and so deadly we can't use it on our agriculture, on our crops. So, but it's still made and it's still sold all over third world countries. The Mexican cartels get it in Tijuana. They have to smuggle it up with their operatives to do this. This is what the stuff looks like. That pink Aquafina bottle is not an energy drink. It's not an exercise shake, it's anything but. And anyone running across this, we just need to be really careful because these stashes are in parks, they're off on trails. When we look at the wildlife impacts, here's a gray fox that ingested some carbofuran, died within minutes. This golden eagle came in to be a carry-on bird like he does. He's gonna eat off the fox, and then the eagle dies. And when IERC, that's Dr. Murad Gabriel with UC Davis and with Integral Ecology Research Center, doing the full data studies, and this was the national standard to show how bad these poisons are when we started to see golden eagles, gray fox, the Pacific fish are almost extinct, we realized this soil is red hot like a nuclear fallout zone. No exaggeration. And this is what got DEA's attention with us pushing it on the fish and game front, that you got to stop rewarding us financially to do these operations based on plant count. You need to get into the environmental reclamation. How many poison bottles are we taking out of the woods? How many creeks are we restoring? How many banks are we stabilizing so the siltation doesn't go into the water and, decimate fisheries, decimate spawning, harm our cattle, harm our tule elk, everything else that's drinking from these waterways. It's called pink death. El Diablo is what the growers call this stuff. They know how deadly it is, but they use it by protocol. It's a standard operating procedure. Odorless, colorless, crystalline. When diluted, it becomes like a pink liquid or a yellow liquid. And it's used by cartels all over the country, and it's used by African poachers to dump into water sources that want to take rhinos and elephants for the multi-million, billion-dollar ivory trade, because they know they can pour half a jug or half a container of that in a water pond. And those big ivory animals, the magnificent animals, are going to drink that stuff, and those guys don't have to fire a shot to alert the rangers of where they're killing an animal illegally. They're going to die a painful death from a nerve reaction as their nervous system shuts down, and that poacher's $500,000 richer. A lot of wooded habitat. These are all Santa Clara County examples. I made sure to have home pictures because we are on the home front right now. More water pollution. This is that site I told the stories about. Have no idea what's in that stuff. Nasty. And then we got the animal and human snares. We're going to start getting into traps we see in these things that people need to be aware of, especially in the rural states where you can run across something like this. Here's one of our canines in a 550 cord snare. Not too dangerous, but it was enough to tie up our dog. And I was on one mission, I think here somewhere, and one of my operators was up north and just started snapping pictures of our new canine, little Beto there, who's now passed many years ago, caught in one of those. I know we have some veterans or have some family that have seen or had relatives that fought in the Vietnam War, maybe some that have fought in the Vietnam War. Many of my relatives have. And they would tell me these stories about these punji pits. And sharpened bamboo sticks that the VC used, they put a cover over it so they'd fall into a disguised trail. It would have human excrement on the very sharp sticks. Our soldiers would gash, get infections, tear up their feet, their legs, their shins, and basically down a lot of our fighting forces. Well, Whiskeytown National Park in 2015, 2016, we found one, actually Brian Boyd, soon to be retiring lieutenant, and Canine Phoebe detected this before our point man, a sheriff's deputy and a sniper, almost stepped into this trap on a public trail going into, still 200 yards from the grow site, on a public trail everybody hiked in a national park. That was a big deal for us to see that. That was a big deal for National Park Service to see it. We've had grows in Yosemite. There was one in Sequoia Kings Canyon just a month and a half ago, another outdoor grow with this push. So something we need to be very, very careful of. We've had about 6 or 7 of these punji pits statewide in the last 7 or 8 years, but fortunately, they're not in every grow site, but very dangerous. This was the 12 gauge that was pointed at me the day we had our first gunfight, the day my partner was almost killed. Just showing you the propensity for violence. Pistols like we carry on duty and off duty, a Glock, body armor. I'm throwing up so I can make sure to get everything in, guys. Not your typical poachers. Trail camera picture from a Vietnam veteran getting ready for a bear hunt. This is up below Sequoia Kings Canyon. And he expects to see deer and bear for his upcoming hunt and sees that. We get the call, and we scout it out, we find the grow, and a couple weeks later we catch these guys in their kitchen in the morning, and that doesn't look like a hunter or anybody that really needs to be in our national parks. last I checked. Fortunately, our dogs did a great job. Nobody got hurt that day. A mountain lion poisoned in the drought. This was a quarter mile from the shooting site where my partner was shot, and we had that first engagement on Sierra Azul above Los Gatos that day. This is peak drought. He punctured one of the grow water lines, the black poly pipe that you saw the pictures of, ingested a little bit of that carbofuran, and 10, 15 minutes later, this cat is dead. It was a collared cat from UC Santa Cruz, so it had a mortality ping. The biologist went to try to look at it. He had a name, he had a profile, everybody knew him on Facebook. And they went in and saw they were walking into a grow site and went, uh-oh, backed out, called us. We went and helped them get the cat. But the point of that picture is we did the necropsy, got into the biology of it, took tissue samples, and found the carbofuran trace before it dissipates in this animal to show how that these animals were being killed by these poisons. Now, one thing about this issue that I like is I can talk to a completely left-leaning animal rights group, or I could come to a right-leaning Liberty Forum talk, like-minded, like all of us in the room, that have a conservation background. Maybe you hunt and fish, and maybe you have people that are preservationists and think killing animals for consumption is just evil. But you show them animals dying like this from these poisons, like this mother black bear, and then her baby that ingests the same poisons and doesn't die before mom and is freaked out that mom's not responding, so climbs up in the tree 10 feet above the mother bear, the sow, and dies as well. And that's what we walk into in a grow site in Sequoia Kings Canyon. You will not have a dry eye in the room. And you'll have everybody on the same page. This is the most unifying. One thing I found is, one thing about being the marijuana enforcement team is, we had all these growers up in Humboldt County that were traditional outlaws, but they were using clean water, they weren't putting any poisons, they were very environmentally conscious, they were just doing a black market crop. So the handcuffs went to kind of handshakes and hugs, they started calling us the Earth Warriors, they were having trouble with cartels, and I said, okay, let's work together, guys. We got a bigger enemy to fight. And so this is one thing that has been really good. And one thing that got Joe Rogan's attention when I did my interview with him, he didn't know about this threat. He's a pro-cannabis guy. He's also an elk hunter and a conservationist, so he was outraged by it. He made himself part of the Thin Green Line. He's become a friend. He's shouting at the message, the issue with many, many other guests. And that's what really helped bring this into the mainstream outside of California, because there was no news on this to the depth of the impacts we're having nationally, because nobody wanted it out of California. This message was not supposed to go out. Cartels don't jive with regulated cannabis and getting cannabis regulated and not having complaints. It gets very political, and I know I'm preaching to the choir on that. Won't go into that, but more of the damage. Poison golden eagle, this guy's showing off. This came off his cell phone after we caught him in a foot chase behind Mount Hamilton, across the valley. And this grower right here had the carbofuran in his backpack when I tackled him and chased him down a hill. I had no idea what was splashing around in that irrigation sprayer on his back. Fortunately, it didn't burst. And when myself and Sergeant Spagnola, one of my veteran brothers from the sheriff's office, now retired, got this information, we realized he's showing off to his bosses. A golden eagle is a prohibited species. It's protected, all the things. Let's go real quick and talk about Phoebe. Let's talk about a canine for a minute. Cool? Can I go into that? I talked about what she did. There she is after a Croy Road grow site, Uvis Reservoir, right close to Morgan Hill, saving my life that day. The book goes into this story. But 12 years of making history. That's her with her tongue out. She's happy. She's found another gun. She's caught 2 growers. Whenever she misses a grower, which is very rare, like any type A, she can get a little pissy, give us attitude. Her handler has to call her meathead. She's kind of like aloof. So, like most of us on the team, we don't like to lose. But she wasn't going anywhere canine. This was her first stop on a kayak when we were in one of our peak droughts in 2016. Jet boats from our Delta Bay enforcement team got us into a kayak. Then we got into areas where we could assault them on foot because there was no water in our foothills. They couldn't even get underground water for their grows. But Phoebe did a great job that day, and it was a good op. We were honored in the Capitol in 2017. Ironically, this was 1 year after Prop 64 and regulated cannabis changed. We got a resolution award, the first in the history of our agency, from the Senate, and the Assembly actually gave the resolution award to Canine Phoebe. They said, you met guys, whatever. We're all about the dog. So we're in the Capitol getting this award with our team and our command staff and our press people and our chiefs. And we're going round and round. They're like, this is great. Listen to this. 3 million marijuana plants toxically tainted, 1,000 guns, this many felons, so many poisons. And you guys regulated this. It became legal a year ago under this model. And like, oh, it's still going on. This was supposed to stop the problem. So it was eye-opening for them, right? And we could take this to other states and show what not to do and also learn on what we've done in California. She lasted about 4 hours getting handshakes and hugs and pets, and then she was hiding under pews. She was kind of done with the Capitol that day, but it was an eye-opener and educational for everybody. The counter canine tactics, they've been attacking our dogs now for the better part of 7 or 8 years. They know these dogs basically are the driving force of teams that are taking not only millions but billions of dollars out of these criminal enterprises' pockets. So what they started to do is target our dogs, knowing we can't use deadly force and engage them with firearms unless we have a deadly threat upon ourselves, but bring the dog in, suck them in with a shank like this made of a black-tailed deer bone, and go for the jugular or go for between the front ribs of the dog. And we had 2 federal dogs killed. This is Canine Ice. He was a Forest Service dog that ran long and hard with Canine Phoebe. He was just a little prodigy. Watching those 2 together, and I had that privilege with my guys on the team. He was attacked. This is him with his handler, fresh out of surgery. And by the good graces, that little dog survived. And he went on to have a full career and retire. Not everybody was so lucky. These are the unregulated private indoor-outdoor grow sites in hoop houses. This is Palmdale, Los Angeles, down on the Los Angeles Southern Desert. Concentrated, more poisons, fuels leaking, all this waste coming out of these grow sites going into, well, what's in the desert? What environment is in the desert? What impacts do you have? You have water, you have endangered species. So these indoor grow sites that are now sanctioned and encouraged, and there's no real penalty, and other states following our model are having the massive environmental damage that we're seeing, as well as the trafficking and other things. State droughts, illegal water trucks pulling water 24 hours a day to basically do this Amazon super warehouse look of unregulated hoop house grows. This was a 257 search warrant operation with about 50 agencies that took out, these are all illegal grow sites, unregulated. I want to talk about the Asian connection, especially the Chinese working hand in hand with Mexican cartels. This is something that really came about after Regulation 28/2019, it's really blown up. We know they're not just working together, but the Chinese are getting into black market grow sites because of the mass amount of cash money they can make on the black market, and they can launder it in America in plain sight and then turn it over into their currency standard. The Mexican cartels like to work with the Chinese because the Mexican cartels right now want to dominate the fentanyl and the meth-amphetamine trade, so much more money in it than marijuana or cannabis, and they need those precursor chemicals from the Chinese. And for the Chinese to know that they're putting out toxically tainted, nerve agent tainted cannabis to user groups from 12 years old to 50, 60 years old, they know they're eroding us from within. And that's certainly not a problem for China. They're not our friends. We all know that. So they're eroding us from within. They're making money in every state of the union. They're trafficking their own people and other people into work in these grow sites, from abductions and everything else, and not only working in harmony, but partnering with the Mexican cartels. Chinese were starting at 6% to launder the money for a fee for the Mexican cartels. That's usually what it would cost Jalisco, Sinaloa, to launder their money. Right now they're paying nothing to the Chinese. It's that harmonious. And we're the dumping ground for that. Middle America is basically their stomping grounds. They're operating in every state. The methamphetamine, human and child sex trafficking, gun running, it's not just cannabis. These are public enemy number one. And this trend exploded through the pandemic because, like I said, of access. Jalisco New Generation, I mentioned, they were making $33 million a week on the border during the last administration, smuggling operatives and just anybody that needed to get across the southern border. And now we know with 21 million non-citizens here undocumented approximately, and I know the deportations and identifying all that kind of has started. We're still a long way from knowing who's here. I mentioned the terrorist list in this list, 500,000 unaccompanied minors, children, mostly young children, and almost 250,000 of them unaccounted for today. They're in very bad places. The Chinese brought their own poisons over. We saw these up in Siskiyou County and Los Angeles County 2 years ago for the first time. Now they're in the state of Maine. I was set to go to Maine and visit and do a conversation on Tucker Carlson's podcast 4 days before Charlie was assassinated. God rest his soul. God bless Eric and his children. That was a rough day, I think, for all of us, especially for Tucker, because I know they were very close. We had that conversation. His backyard in rural Maine, where he resides, has the Chinese all over this. He's got a great documentary, actually, on his website to look at. That started here in California and everywhere in between. And now these neurotoxins they've got are just as deadly, if not more so, than the Mexican stuff they're importing up. But this is what they look like. Hazmat suits the growers are using. We saw this in Siskiyou County doing a documentary. I was working with Jorge Ventura, a really young, motivated journalist, now with News Nation, but was with Daily Caller, called Narcofornia. It's on Daily Caller's website. It's a good documentary to watch of what the most pristine part of California left looks like with what the Chinese cartels have done to that county. The private land growth threats, I'll keep it short, are just as deadly as the public land, sometimes more so, because all those poisons are concentrated so much more, and you can get so many more plants, so many more bad guys, so many more guns in one rural area than spread out throughout the forest. I don't like animal cruelty. I love dogs. I know you guys all feel the same way. And we were finding these grow dogs that the Chinese growers were using, and if they weren't working out as guard dogs, they were being abused, they were being starved, and they were being left behind. So these poor canines, just an absolute mess, were rehabbed by people volunteering to make grow site rehab dogs. And we stumbled upon that and we added it into the documentary a little bit. There's Jorge and our rehabber there with a pit bull that was recovered. Very cool stuff. More cartel crimes we got to talk about, guys. The fentanyl, especially, 100,000 Americans dying a year still. And it's the Vietnam conflict over a decade took 75, 80,000 lives. And this is public enemy number one on the fentanyl trade, especially the ones that are made to, and kids are playing with it. Just a horrible issue that's finally being handled with a little bit of priority, thankfully. The cartel meth is something still going on, big market for it. We have the demand in this country, unfortunately. The human trafficking, as we all know, we've heard a lot about it. A lot of money in human trafficking. Gun running is very prolific, especially guns being smuggled from here south to fight the cartel wars in Mexico. Child sex trafficking, as horrible as it gets, more and more of that. We saw a little bit of it in a movie I'm going to talk a little bit about in a minute. And now fuel is being smuggled and sold and stolen by the cartels and then brought into America and sold cheaply, usually in Texas, coming in from Mexico. And avocados, of all things, recently. There's a lot of money in cartel avocados. Who would have thought? Now, this is gross. This was real recent. This was even heavy for what we'd been doing fighting this, but pure evil when this lady, we can say that, one of the headsheds of Jalisco New Generation, which is by far one of the most vicious, tactically trained, highly outfitted with weaponry and tactics. And this was just on the 2nd of September last month. A CGNG leader, Martha Mendez, El Diablo they call her the devil, was having her men abduct pregnant women in remote areas of Mexico, usually Jalisco, Juarez, way down south, and then imprisoning them, luring them in, killing them to do illegal C-sections. Obviously, the women die, the babies are taken, they're being sold in America for $14,000 approximately to American buyers. The organs are being sold post-mortem, pretty vicious even for the stuff we've seen, but it just shows you the evil and the mindset and just the absolute immoral, godless nature of behavior to make a dollar and the lack of respect for human life. And the savagery we've seen face to face fighting these cartels, and I don't exaggerate when I say it's been fist fights, it's been knives being pulled, it's been gun fights, it's been protecting our dogs, it's been doing everything we can physically to take a suspect into control that doesn't want to be controlled. I can attest to how dangerous these folks are for all Americans. When Sound of Freedom dropped a couple of years ago, it hit everybody viscerally, even those of us working this, and kudos for this movie finally making it to the masses after being banned in Hollywood for like 5 years, because this is what gets the masses' attention. Not everybody has a cannabis problem in their backyard. Not everybody has been trafficked or knows someone that has. Not everybody knows someone that's died of a fentanyl death, but we know what's going on, and we know they're very comfortable at our expense. I was asked to testify in Congress 4 or 5 times. We've been able to go twice, and not only on saving our borders and protecting our parks. Silicon Valley, Congress wanted to talk about, because when they were talking about border cartels and border protection, they're like, wait a minute, what's going on in the Silicon Valley? They're up there too? And it was just a point of pointing out that, guys, this is a national problem. It's not a border issue. It's a public safety embedded American issue. That's what's going on here, guys. And then on tribal lands, working with the chiefs and how impacted tribal lands in the most rural, least populated state, my home state of Montana now, and hitting those tribes there. Congress at the time had no idea about the Chinese chemicals. They'd had no idea about the Chinese collusion with the Mexican cartels. And we dropped it on them, and I had those pictures finally for my friends in DEA to share. And we got a little bit of political work on that at the legislative level. Cartels defined as terrorists. I had the opportunity of meeting the now president before his first term in 2016 at a private SHOT Show function in Las Vegas in January of 2016. And essentially, I was there with about 60 other people in the outdoor industry, the tactical world, and I was introduced to John Trump Jr. first by a mutual friend. Gave him a copy of my first book, War in the Woods, and old school, a couple of DVDs from some NRA Life of Duty documentaries we did. And he looked at my friend, Jason, now deceased Jason Hairston, the CEO and founder of Kuyu Outdoor Apparel, and he said, so wait a minute, you're telling me that John and his game wardens and his sheriff's deputies and their whole team, they're getting in gunfights with Sinaloa cartel members in the foothills of the Silicon Valley with neurotoxin nerve agents that are banned on the weed and the water, killing all our wildlife? And Jason said, yep. And Don Jr. looked at me and he said, how the fuck do me and my dad not know this? Jason goes, that's why John's meeting you tonight. Take his book. And then I talked to his father, got the picture obviously. And we didn't know if the election was going to happen, and surprisingly it did, later that year. And one thing they did right away in that administration that I give major prompts for is we're on basically a gag order, lockdown, don't talk about cartels. We couldn't do any more documentaries. We couldn't work with news crews. We couldn't expose this issue because cannabis had to succeed under California leadership. And but the feds were mandated by the Trump administration, Jeff Sessions, that particular AG, that his U.S. attorneys would not ignore cannabis cartel outdoor grows, and they would go after them with absolute impunity. And so we were working with Forest Service, and we were back in business, and we kicked a lot of butt and took a lot of grows and followed up the chain to human trafficking and Plaza Boss level and connections in Mexico. And it was a good start. It was a good start. Obviously this year, earlier, he did something that was such a relief to us on the enforcement side, seeing this, define these groups as foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs, which open the door to military support where appropriate, law enforcement teams being to work, getting to work in sanctuary states like California with impunity, ICE not being told they're not going to have to leave. Whatever we need to do to keep America safe, we're doing. And regardless of the kickback, the Trump administration is doing a really good job, in my opinion, with it. All those different groups I've listed there they're on the hit list, and thank goodness they are. Now we got LEO military operations within U.S. borders, outside borders if needed. The biggest thing is sleeper cells, terrorism, all the things I mentioned. It's really good to see military and law enforcement working together. It's really good to see tactical law enforcement units, game wardens in many states are dealing with this, like we started back here, Texas, Florida, New Mexico, Oregon, Washington. This isn't just a police, it isn't a DEA, it's not a game warden thing, it's a law enforcement issue for everybody as a number one priority. Deplorable felony status reinstated, so you get caught, you're on an international watch list, you're going bye-bye. And that's the way it should be. And now because ICE is working with impunity, and there's nothing stopping them in California, thankfully, or any other state. These growers know that when they get caught in a grow house that cops we can just drive up to in Siskiyou County, they're gone, they're done. So now they're back into the woods, they're back into national parks, they're back into the rural pristine areas, and I kid you not, when talking to my old team members and the new team leaders running it, they are gearing up for a gunfight every mission now, because these guys are not going to give up. They have everything to lose, so they are going to fight to the death. And that's what we're dealing with back in California, like we've gone full circle to 2013, 2014, when I started the unit. But it's something that we're not going to take the foot off the gas, because, as I've said, priority number one here before we go elsewhere. All right, this was the first, these pango boats we saw, just watching them go, interdicting them, tearing up our land, dumping a bunch of diesel and fuel spill off the Monterey coastline, never catching anybody. This was pretty cool. I think you guys might have saw this. Some of us did, but this was the first one that we took out, and they don't need sound on this. It just feels good. Knowing all that fentanyl and those guys, they're not getting anything into America on this run, right? It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So I'm going to end with a Teddy Roosevelt quote, and I just want to say thanks for your time tonight. Thanks to the Liberty Forum. Thanks, Danny, for connecting us. Thanks, everybody I've met tonight, old friends and new friends. I'm going to put up my contact information, guys. If you have questions, if you have a group that would benefit from this presentation, we travel. That's what we do. We're on the outreach circuit now. All of my books, the latest book is the one on the right, the updated second edition of Hidden War. They are available. I even got a couple of our signature everyday carry blades, if anybody wants a blade and a book combo. But definitely stay in touch. And people are moving. And there's my contact information for everybody. I just want to thank the forum, Dave, and all you. And I'll see you again.
But I think first question to sort of quantify kind of what these growing operations look like. What does it look like as far as per plant or per operation, so we can sort of quantify what the value is for a grow like this?
That's a good question, Cooper. They vary in size. A small grow today is about 2,000 plants. A big grow is 10,000 plants or more. They bring, they're poisonous plants, but they're really potent weed. They're 28, 29% THC. They're really popular in the black market. Those poisons that I talked about, I don't remember if I elaborated on it, but you saw the picture of the splotches look like bird poop or like liquid paper, like a misty white. It dries invisible. And you can't taste it, you can't see it, so by the time it gets to the market, no one knows it's on the cannabis they're consuming, but you're talking $3,000 a plant if all those plants make it out of the woods. So a 2,000 plant grow site's at least a couple $1 million, and we've had them in excess of $50 million in 50,000, 100,000 plants.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. That was sort of my first kind of, how do we quantify what this cash value is? Another question, how, surveillance data is growing. I work in cybersecurity, so that's sort of my area, but with the surveillance state growing, with the constant surveillance, everything around, how are these growing operations still staying undercover? How are the illegal operations circumventing, coming in on the boats, underground, et cetera?
Yeah, the biggest thing is they don't really have to hide anymore. It makes surveillance really difficult, because if they're not hiding in public land, which that shift has just kind of started, they're going to rural tracts on property they own that they've kind of embedded into. So every potential home or settlement, say in rural Siskiyou County, is more likely than not an illegal grow site. But they're not going to hide because it's a misdemeanor. And they know if it gets raided, they're going to lose plants. They're not going to go to jail. They're not going to get deported. They weren't before. Now that's changed. But up until then, they just go, hey,
so just rebuild.
I'm responsible for 20 grow sites. I'm probably going to lose 3 or 4 in the next 6 months to law enforcement raids on Friday or whenever they're going to hit.
Build it into the cost of business.
And I'm still going to make $100 million more on the ones they don't get. So that's where all the tech and cat and mouse doesn't even matter. And that's just from bad laws that could have been prevented by just changing the statute of Prop 64.
Wow, fascinating. So kind of following upon kind of the economic idea and everything, what percentage of marijuana and cartel members would you estimate are both here in our backyard, Silicon Valley, Bay Area, and then even wider in California? What would you estimate kind of the national crop being based here?
As far as personnel?
As far as personnel or growing operations?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I remember talking to Joe about it on the Rogan interview, and in that clip, I said approximately 10,000 because I was taking 4 to 5,000 grow sites that we knew of in an average year, either detected or undetected, and at least 2 growers from the Sinaloa cartel in that grow site are responsible for it. So that's a 10,000. It was very conservative. That's not plaza bosses, that's not coordinators, that's not people
on the ground
running supplies for them to grow. And it doesn't take into account human trafficking, fentanyl, methamphetamine. You got to think of the cartels guys are polycriminals. That's how my friends at DEA, they're like a really good general contractor, and there's all these subcontractors, right? One guy that normally does roofing, he's running fentanyl in a quarter of the nation. Another guy's doing methamphetamine. Another guy's running human trafficking rings. Someone else is running cannabis or marijuana grows, indoor and outdoor. So when you look at that many numbers, you're talking hundreds of thousands of operatives in America now. And because of the last administration and 21 million undocumented Americans across, and conservative estimate, 5% of those have cartel affiliations or full-blown cartel, now we're into 7 figures of operatives. So that's how much damage we had from a lack of border control for those agonizing 4 years.
And then to stack on top what you were just saying, it's not a matter of finding them or knowing they're there. It's a matter of actually taking care of them because we know where they are.
Exactly.
They can just operate with impunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That was a good question.
Well,
good
speaking of operating without impunity, we have a bunch of questions. Can we just do the same thing to the grow sites that we did with the Penja boat?
In a perfect world? Yeah, we just got to avoid fire danger in the summer,
Right,
or we're
right.
gonna have a California wildfire that's going to
Exactly.
arrive. It's going to make that car fire look.
Yeah. But
It's worth the risk. I heard somebody say it's worth the risk.
on a more serious note, are drones playing an operation in this as well?
Great
so that
question.
Was another
Thank you,
question
brother,
that
for
was
that.
asked.
Great
Yes.
question on drones. Yes. We on the Met front, a drone program started shortly after I retired. Military assets are using drones as well at a Moffett. And even before the Foreign Terrorist Organization definition that really opened up the military's ability to work with us on the law enforcement, Counter Drug Task Force out of Moffett Field, 7th Special Forces Group, the Green Berets, and the PJs, when they were not deployed fighting the global war on terror, they were embedded in grow sites with us on Met. As long as they weren't taking direct action and supporting us, we've been working with Special Forces military assets on grows within eyesight of when we leave this building and look at the foothills around it. And I can't tell you how awesome it was to work with those guys, not only to learn from them, but share ideas. Lifelong friendships and brotherhoods were made. But it also opened the military's eyes to what's happening in their own backyard, where they left to go fight a global war on terror in an area, a part of the world that they did their duty, and they said, I got a big problem back at home. I just want to get back and get on counter.
Yeah, they're eradicating the poppy fields in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and we've got grow fields right
Yeah,
here.
they're like, I want to get home and do this. I got to deal with this. Yeah, so that's a great question. And the technology like drones, military assets, surveillance, weaponry, you name it, it's really a very blurred differentiation now between special forces, law enforcement fighting this, and the military. We're running the same stuff. We're working together on it. And that's the way it needs to be if we're going to be effective.
Yep. So apart from drones, kind of just for sake of the audience, what are some other technologies that you guys are leveraging, either military side or civilian operator side, to track? I know obviously the trail cams are a big thing that you guys are collecting from the hunters, but of course that's older tech. What sort of other tech are we leveraging nowadays?
Yeah, one thing I can talk about, because it doesn't get
stuff
anything.
You can talk about.
Yeah,
yes.
It doesn't. And Coop, it doesn't get anything classified, but satellite imagery exponentially has improved in the last 10 years. And what I can say is, not long before I retired, I was asked to talk to the Stanford think tank of computer and electrical engineers, graduate students, and did a presentation like this. And they got about 10 slides in. They said, "We've seen enough, Lieutenant. We got answers. Here's how we're going to fight it." And I can't say what they're doing and what technology they have from satellites and from drones, but it's mind-blowing of what they can see, how far they can penetrate, and that was 5-6 years ago.
Wow.
And I know that stuff is, yeah. So when you get, some of the best minds in tech, and there's a little pride that it came here from the Silicon Valley, from Stanford, and also San Jose State, my alma mater, we know that that's going to go to use nationally. It's going to go to use internationally. I think using that type of tech to protect our own homeland and protect our resources, rather than make another fighting implement that's improved, speaks droves to what we're really using that technology for.
Yes. All right, this is an interesting one. Why is it still profitable for the cartels to grow illegally and on the black market when it is legal? So how does that play in?
That's a good question, and we just have to look at how it breaks down. We don't have regulated cannabis in every state, guys. So there's many states that it's still illegal. So in the legal states, and this is completely oxymoronic when I describe it, but follow me for a minute. In a legal state, all the illegal growers go into that legal state because they know they don't have a penalty like I just described, Siskiyou County misdemeanor. They make all this illegal weed that they're going to get a slap on the wrist for. They might lose some plants, but that goes to all the illegal states that they have a consumptive need and a market for to get this toxically tainted weed. So the legal markets, the way they're structured, are incentivizing the cartels to put poison cannabis out into the market. Now, people have asked me multiple times on podcasts and even in congressional testimony, what's the solution? I said, look, regardless of where you sit on the cannabis consumption world, whether you're a cannabis user or not, this is a rough approximation, but 43 million-ish Americans, give or take a few million, are cannabis consumers on some level. That's not going to go away with legality, illegality, black market poisoning. That's not going to stop. So are we considering looking at federal regulation, like tobacco and firearms and alcohol, and breaking the back, at least mostly in the cannabis world, of the cartels? Is that going to stop fentanyl and human trafficking, all those other heinous, inhumane crimes? No, it's not. But I think it would have a massive impact on our environmental resources, especially what little we have left, in America. And California is a prime example of losing a lot by the day. So that's something we have to consider. How are we going to tackle this? If the demand is not going to go away, the problem is not going to go away. How are we going to minimize the effects of that problem to be the least damaging on our people, our public first and foremost, and then our triple W's, our wildlife, waterways, and wildland second.
So this is interesting then. So following up on that, where you're saying, okay, we got to change the legislation, work through the legal levels now. Where does dark money and lobbying then play into that factor? Are there cartels then working dark money into the legislative process, into the lobbying process to get this legalized or make it easier?
I'd like to say there isn't, but I'm very, very certain without having proof that there is. Some black money there from the bad guys on that side. I can also say that it brings up a good point. 30% of my job when I was given the task of building the team and then running it was outreach, like what we're doing tonight. But what I did before Prop 64 was enacted, there was about a 2-year grace period. We knew it was coming at agency level. So I was in the governor's office, I was talking to lobbyists, I was presenting to the governor's aides and saying, guys, we know regulation's coming. Okay, no one's fighting that. California will be happy. But if you're going to regulate correctly. Don't take the bite out of illegal cannabis growing on private or public land, on our cattle ranches, our public parks, our national forests. Keep the felony statute there. Fund those agencies with the money you're going to make from taxes and registration fees and permit fees as a legal grower. Because after working with the legal growers at grower association meetings, when they had a grace period to get legal, and here are these quote-unquote outlaws that would never want to be around a law enforcement officer or coming to meetings that I'm speaking at on a panel, it was a little weird. They were freaking out. They were like, is he taking down our license plates? Is he going to follow me back to the farm and raid it? What's going on? But the point is, at that point, we were just trying to work together. And when the law passed in November that year, in 2016, and I saw the misdemeanor statute and the infraction, I went, it just got Western. No pun intended. It's going to get really bad, and we are going to be very busy, and we're going to see cannabis enforcement becoming a mainline environmental crime, fighting entity in fish and game departments, state parks. State parks has the special enforcement team. I help build those guys up and train them. State parks has their own team. I mean, you're looking at resource agencies that you would not think would be out there just fighting these cartels, and that's what it's come down to us having to do. And really the law has crippled us and put us to play whack-a-mole, and that's what we're dealing with now. We're holding back the tide, we're not correcting the problem.
Because someone was asking then, how are we supposed to get these laws passed when all the Silicon Valley bros are all pro-pot?
Hey, be pro-pot, that's not even an issue. Just, if you're pro-pot, and I look at it this way, anyone that's a cannabis consumer, I know a lot of tier 1 growers up in the Emerald Triangle and not far from here. They win an Emerald Cup every year. We stay in touch. They give me intel. They're totally by the book. They're the few that are actually making it in the market.
So that was going to be my next question. So if people do pot, because I've talked to doctors and other public health people, they're saying a lot of the problems with pot are from these neurotoxins on the leaves. I mean, apart from the pot itself, which isn't great. Yeah. But if someone were to, how can you ensure that you're getting better strains or
that's the thing.
Not covered in neurotoxins?
It's got to come from a really good grower that's vetted, that's licensed, that's certified. It's going through a dispensary. But what I can say is, even in dispensaries right now that are being undermined by the cartel, all that dirty weed's getting into dispensaries. So I can't sit here tonight and tell you where pure weed is, or where a grower or where a consumer would go for legal cannabis that doesn't have some level of toxic effects, because it's everywhere now. The legal industry right now in California is being run into the ground, and most are getting out of it. They can't afford to stay in it because the Mexican and the Chinese, Asian cartels have absolutely killed their potential to do what was envisioned with this law.
So someone was also asking, what about hiking, camping, all that kind of stuff? What to look out for? Is it still safe? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, that's the best question of the night. And I talk to a lot of kids groups, especially, that do outdoor recreation. And the biggest thing is, if you see anything like the pictures I showed tonight, and I couldn't go into all of them, I kind of have a what to do if you run into longer PowerPoint. There's a bunch of pictures in the new book that are color. Our publisher was really good to put these preventative pictures of what this poison looks like, what is a grow trail, what is a black poly line going that you might see in the forest, or a stash, what they call a cache of supplies. If you see something like that, you're not going to go any further. You're going to take at least a cell phone picture. We all know there's meta GPS data on a cell phone picture, so we know where it's at from an enforcement agency. Get out the way you came in. Most people that recreate off trail and find these grows have a little bit of outdoor awareness. They're usually hunters, anglers, ranchers. They know how to move in the woods. They know when something isn't right. They can kind of read the terrain, and so they're not going to spaz out, make a lot of noise. They're going to go into hunting mode. They're going to creep out safely, and they're going to call us or the sheriff's office. But get those photos, document what you're seeing. And then we can go from there. And now it's a lot easier to find and scout that grow safely, where the old days we had to go backtrack, hike it. It might have been weeks before we could set up on it, but with drones, with satellite imagery, with overlay maps, the game has really changed. We're a lot faster now.
No, it was interesting that you said that, because stay on trails, but if someone is off trails, then they probably know what they're doing anyway. So move back the way you came from.
Good question. Thank you for that, whoever put that out there.
Another one, how many grows or operations would you estimate are still left in the state that would need to be busted? I know it's like whack-a-mole, but I mean, are we looking at, like, is this something that we're actually gaining on? Is this something that's just whack-a-mole constantly? Is this like, it's shrinking slowly? Is it growing?
That's a good question, but it's not a good answer.
Okay.
Because we are playing whack-a-mole, and because California grows, we are the weed state. We're really the weed state of the world. We grow great cannabis, really potent cannabis, just like great wine, right? Napa Valley, all that. And we're one of only 6 true Mediterranean climates on the globe, which lends itself to good cannabis growing. So because of the demand is there, and because there have been several attempts to modify, repeal, and redesign Prop 64. It's going nowhere under the current administration in California. You never hear about it. The whole issue of the cartel just gets whitewashed. Cannabis is regulated. There's tax money coming in. We're making all this money. And it's completely opposite. So until that changes, brother, it's not going to get better. We're not reducing the number. It's just growing. And It might not be growing in massive numbers in California, but Oklahoma, Maine, Michigan, all those other states I'm starting to work with, the ruralness of California, more so even Montana, Maine is as rural as it gets. Oklahoma, doing some stuff back there, working with Michigan, and working with their state patrol guys. Last year we went out and did some classes. It was like California 50 years ago, and now they're just overwhelmed. So again, if you're gonna regulate under that model that we've done, and the pride of being from California is like, okay, for the weed state, let's give a good example if you're gonna regulate cannabis, and we did just the opposite. So we failed miserably again, unfortunately, and now I kind of talk to other states that are considering regulation, or they're now embracing the problem. I go, here's exactly what not to do from my old home state of Cali. And they're like, and maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. Ultimately, sadly, when the political entity gets involved and they see the dollar signs, that's all that matters. Nobody looks at wilderness, wildland, waterway impacts. Nobody looks at toxically tainted cannabis. They just see the dollar signs. And again, the motivation just becomes completely self-centered. And without, soapboxing too much, we start to, erode ourselves from within if we're not looking at the bigger picture. And that's what's happened with the cannabis market, unfortunately.
So I know we touched on this a little bit already, but once caught and convicted of drug crimes, are law enforcement, such as, prosecutors, taking it seriously and prosecuting? And then also, to throw another question in there, what would you say to more the libertarian side that says if we legalize everything, flood the market with legal weed, then the illegal cartels would shy away?
Yeah, both good questions. I think I don't know if you just stopped all regulation on cannabis and just said any drug goes. I mean, we've seen Oregon try that. We've seen other, and it's just been, it's been a proverbial show, to put it mildly. So I don't think that's a good solution. I've never seen that model work when it's even been tested a little bit throughout the nation. And we just have to change the law. That's the bottom line. We have to get a leadership, get a governor in this state that sees the problem. And there's a guy out there, I know him, he's in Riverside, I did work with him. All right, he's very, very familiar. And I promise you, you will not see this law last much longer, whatever it takes to get the Assembly and the Senate behind him, behind us as a whole, And again, this isn't an anti-cannabis message. I've never said, we're not demonizing weed for any group, whatever. The masses have spoken, not my personal opinion, but that doesn't matter. It's the bigger game of what's going to protect our public and what's going to protect our triple W's. And it's a leadership change.
So I think kind of to answer this question, it's not so much you guys are doing the work on the ground.
Absolutely.
And then even the prosecutors are trying, but their hands are tied.
Yeah,
and so
and to your
we
point,
got to change it from the legislative perspective.
We absolutely do. And to your point, you have prosecutors that are chomping at the bit to get into these crimes. They see the devastation of it, but unless we have EPA banned felon toxins or human trafficking or felonies, they can't make a case. So we will make cases, but we will put so much effort into finding all those other crimes. There's 200 gross that didn't get tackled that are stealing 5 gallons of water per plant per day through the peak droughts of California, where ranchers, farmers can't water their crops, they can't feed their livestock. We saw this in Siskiyou County, yet those same ranchers and farmers were on a water ration under a state mandate through the current administration because we're in another century-long drought. So when that continues, we're done. We change it at the top, and you're going to see great things start to happen. It was also like a change of administration for us on the fish and game front. When this team got green lit under the political climate of California, was literally an act of the good man above. There's no way this team should have been built. If it hadn't been that perfect timing with the right chief that didn't care about politics, that had a great reputation, and we didn't care about politics on the team level, and we knew what we were going up against, we knew the criticisms we'd take, that's what it's going to take. And I think what I think in California now, not only with us in this room, but what I see being in the state so much, I got to say, guys, there's a pep in my step with a little hope and encouragement, because both sides of the political fence right now are seeing the tomfoolery going on up top. And California's a great state that's
Yes.
being eroded, right?
Yep.
We want
and not to endorse anybody, but I also like Sheriff Chad.
Yeah.
We just had him a couple.
I didn't say the name,
I just
but-
had him a couple weeks ago as well.
Yeah.
So thoughts on Trump sending in army and actual military assets into Mexico, collaborating with the Mexican government. Is that going to be helpful to you guys here? And is that overall going to be beneficial?
It can be beneficial as long as everybody's willing to pay the price. And something I blew through just because of time. One of the ramifications when you start to take military assets, and it's not just going to be our regular military, it's going to be tier 1 assets from SEAL Team, Delta, guys I work with very closely, doing the type of job we used to do on the special operations front, and they're going to be very effective. But we got to remember, a lot of Americans live in Mexico, right? We have relations. This isn't over in the Middle East, we're going and fighting a drug war. We're fighting with our neighbor to the south. We have a massive problem with our neighbor to the north, too. We don't talk about that a lot, but that northern border right now that I live 25 air miles from now, on the Alberta border, is so porous of 5,000 miles of massive wilderness, and the border agents I know up there, with the southern border being so tight, now that's going to become critical mass number 1 right now. Look at it, and it's going to hit states like remote Montana, right? Like the Dakotas, everything you're going to see up there around the Great Lakes. It's that whole stretch. So if we're going to bring in military assets, our people have to be prepared, and people that live in Mexico or travel in Mexico or go to Canada, there's some things we're going to have to give up or take risks. There's not enough law enforcement to tackle this thing. And I can say one thing, as much as I talk about China, and China has no goodwill for us as Americans, we know that. They definitely are making a lot of money. I've talked about what they're doing in cannabis. But I was talking to Andy Stump. We were doing a Change Agents podcast earlier this week, and Andy and I were going into the Chinese connection some more. And he said, can you imagine if a Mexican cartel set up shop in mainland China? Compared to what we're doing with our cartels here, what would happen?
Right.
That military would wipe the floor with those guys in 72 hours. They wouldn't stand a chance. So what's stopping us from taking half that level of capability we have with military assets, with technology? I believe we do need to do it, but we need to do it very strategically, and we need to do it very carefully, and everybody has to be willing to take the risk, including us sitting here as citizens in this room. And I don't think we're going to do it without some semblance of military support. We are seeing military working. We haven't got that overt mission in Mexico, but I suspect it's coming soon. And I would just tell every American with the potential terrorist threats that are here in America, and the fact that if we start hitting Mexico really hard or something happens to across the northern border in Canada, there's going to be some blowback to us as civilians potentially. And our kids and grandkids, whoever's traveling abroad, need to be ready for that. We might have to be a little more stringent on where we go and what we recreate, where we do business, because it'll get pretty nasty, but we got to solve the problem.
All right, another couple questions. These are interesting. Also, shout out to Alex, who's back here organizing all these questions for me. She's doing awesome back here. I'm just reading what you guys have given me.
Good
and what
questions,
Alex
by the
has
way, guys.
synthesized for
These
me.
are great questions.
So I'm the one that looks good up here. Ask him to John, but it's a whole process getting him to me. So thank you, Alex.
Starting with them.
Yes, starting with you guys. And yes, like Alex said, I'm also size 12 men's, and we're trying hard to fill Jane's shoes. But we miss Jane and wish her the best. So pivoting to some kind of more environmental questions, why are the cartels using these pesticides and chemicals? Are they cheaper, more effective? Why would they be using that over, the normal Roundup, even though that's not great?
That's another great question. The cartels use these nerve agents because they're so effective. They don't care about the ramifications to their growers if they're exposed. They don't care about the public consumer. They just know if I put a couple drops of diluted Carbofuran or metaphos on one marijuana plant, a rabbit, a golden eagle, a mountain lion, a deer, a human, they're not going to get anywhere near that plant because they're going to just breathe that aroma and their nervous system's going to start reacting within a couple of minutes. So they just want that plant to make maximum money, knowing that it's basically a Superfund toxically tainted plant. They don't care. And that's the only reason, because you look at an organic grower, and I take these DEM certified growers in Northern California, even right here in our county, that and surrounding counties, and you look at the effort they go to have a pure plant, and how much they're not making and how much money they're putting into making that pure plant. Cartels are like, we got this, 20-fold profit margin, people can die, we don't care, and that's why.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. That's what I figured. So then how, once you find an illegal grow operation, what does it look like to safely dispose of those chemicals and the drugs and clean the area?
It depends on the grow site. It's a really good question, and basically there's a lot of workup that goes into protocol now that we know what we're dealing with exposed chemicals. And if we find a grow site, say tomorrow, it's going to be a couple of weeks before we probably rate it realistically, because we know it's got poisons in it. We know we have to approach from the right wind side. We know we have to have hazardous material specialists with the right containers, because we can't even handle that stuff with our protective equipment. Wardens and DEA agents and sheriffs, nitrile gloves, uniforms that can be decontaminated. You saw the growers N95 little Tyvek suits in my one slide, and also in the video. We're all fitted for that now, just to go into a grow site. If those plants are tainted and we can literally see that sheen no matter what we're wearing, we're leaving the area. It needs at least a week to dissipate before we can go in and start to take that stuff out. So, and the growers know that, and so that puts the whack-a-mole down to less effectiveness and just, kind of hog ties us, if you will, for a lot longer, knowing how dangerous this stuff is. But it has to be done safely or it can't be done at all.
Yeah, I remember talking to a deputy who was on a similar bus like this, and he said they were carrying out plants. It went through his uniform, went through everything, and it said he had a massive rash and everything from that. And then another question, do the bombed boats poison sea creatures?
What's that?
Do the bombed boats poison sea creatures?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would imagine with all that fentanyl and all that meth in that boat that just got nuked, something got affected.
You got some whales that are swimming high.
Yeah, I can't prove it, but that's a lot of narcotic, man.
Oh man. All right, so
question.
now we got some personal questions here. Can we do a movie or Netflix documentary about your story? And can Mel Gibson direct it? And then I'll add on, can Jim Caviezel play you?
Well, you just, first of all, you got two wired right men that are Christians, so I'm going to say, yeah, there's no issue with that. Both guys are great. And they don't have to play me or anybody else, but to bring this story into the attention on whatever level.
Sounds like it'd be a really cool story.
Documentary, and there's a term in Hollywood I've learned, and without going into too much detail, there are things developing with Hidden War on that front. Edutainment. How do you get to people that are just turning on the TV, watching a fun show to escape from the reality, that don't want to actually hear this really kind of depressing story I told you all the night, but you're here, right? Because we care. So how do you get to the masses for people to go, oh my gosh, maybe I don't want to ingest cannabis as a teenager at this dance prom or whatever, because I don't know where it's coming from. And it's going to come from something that's generated in the fictional space. It just is, because that's what we all pay attention to.
Yes.
And it's really nice to see things like Angel Studios, and you mentioned
exactly.
the stories. And I will say one thing, I'm belaboring it, but as much as I've worked this stuff, I remember we were at a local theater watching Sound of Freedom. And I remember knowing what was going on. I was so emotionally outraged, I was almost ripping the armrest off my recliner chair, teared up, and I just wanted to go to work again and start crushing evil, And you want people to feel that have never seen it, and they're starting to, We're starting to bring a little bit of God back.
And I think you've done, amen to that, yes. And I think you've done a good job at communicating.
We have
that.
to.
On road again, you did a great job communicating that here this evening.
Yeah, for sure.
And then what was sort of your story of how you got in? Well, I mean, you covered your story, but when you first got into game wardening, how long were you just standard warden before you all of a sudden turned and started the task force and all that? What did that look like? You just wanted to be a game warden and preservation and all that to start.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was a total shocker to think we'd be having this conversation tonight.
Exactly.
And God works in very mysterious ways. This was not in the original plan, but I'm glad it worked the way it did. That traditional stuff up until 2004, in that first story I gave, and knowing that I had learned to backpack in Henry Coast State Park, just about 100,000 acres up from all favorite cattle ranches and families I've
grown
grown
up
up
all
with.
around hiking.
You know it,
there.
right?
Oh yeah,
You've
for
hiked
sure.
it. I mean,
I've been on those private ranches too. And
yeah, we don't have anything better, I think, in California.
Henrico's grandson was a good friend of mine growing up too. So
that's real. That's historical.
Yeah.
But that was the thing when I saw that grow site, and it was personal, you know. And I knew that this water was coming from and now it's going through. This was once a viable cattle ranch. Now it's a county property that's people are going to be hiking it someday. That's when I knew this is what I cared the most about. And I kind of had to tether my excitement from administrators. It was like, what are you guys doing? Okay, you found one, you rated one, you're done. Go back to checking licenses, or, we got a deer opener going. And don't get me wrong, the best job on the planet, I think, in law enforcement, I don't want to disparage any other branch, but being a game warden and working with all ages, especially our kids, in the conservation, getting them exposed to the outdoors, especially in an urban environment like we're becoming nationally, there's no greater feeling. Those traditional cases are super important, and that's the problem now that we're fighting these cartels. We don't say the thin green line for anything. The thin green line is like getting so tenuous and thin now, because we have to do this, and we have to fight cartels, and we still have to do deer openers. We still have to deal with mountain lion depredations, help our ranchers, help our public that are having poacher from neighbors, spotlighters, whatever. But in 04, especially the gunfight in 05, when we all survived that, there was about 2 weeks of administrative leave that we all have to take in a shooting investigation. And, my mind, my body, everything viscerally was on like warp factor 5. I couldn't sleep. I was taking notes. I was journaling. I didn't realize it would lead to the chapters in the first book. But trying to process everything and realizing I can't. I'm still processing what I saw in Sierra Azul. That deadly, that prepared, that much poison, that much just train wreck environmentally, that much water stolen, and I went, and that's only one grow. I said, I don't know that I've ever seen an environmental crime so devastating as a game warden. I've worked some big cases environmentally, even in Southern California. And so long-windedly, that's when it started.
Someone was also asking what high school you went to, if you want to share.
Sure. I'm an Acorn. I'm a Live Oak Acorn from Morgan Hill, class of 86, and I know I'm dating myself.
Someone was also asking, do you have any talks scheduled with any far left groups or open space preservation people or anything like that upcoming?
I have to check on some schedules, but I have every group.
Nice.
And like I said, one thing
really unifies, yeah.
One thing about this message is I can go into a group and everybody will get something out of it. Cannabis user groups, especially animal rights groups, preservation groups, they're just as outrageous as we are. Yeah, but more, I'd say it's a 2-to-1 ratio, of groups like us. We're a little more like-minded here. A lot of law enforcement groups, security groups, just military groups. Like I said, a lot of my friends in special forces, whether it's naval special warfare or Army, Marines, even Air Force PJs that are now retired, they're chomping to get back in the game and help us either as advisors, spread the word, through podcast forums that have, influencer reach. And those guys want to come back home and they want to keep doing good.
Yeah, for sure.
And we want to see more of that, National Guard or getting involved in law enforcement, becoming game wardens like several special operators have done now.
Wow. And that's what's cool about the game wardens is it sort of bridges that gap. The environmentalists, the law enforcement community, the right wing, the left wing, it kind of, you guys are the thin green line.
Yeah, and you can have a full military career and start with us, and they don't force us out till 65 years old if you're healthy enough to run the hills. So that's pretty cool if you want to double down.
So in conclusion, what can we as an audience here do? Silicon Valley crowd, what can we do to spread the word or be involved or be on the lookout? How can we honor your and your colleagues' sacrifices and efforts in making that count?
Cooper, thank you for that question. And the biggest thing is knowledge is power, and just be a voice. I mean, everyone here can call the governor's office when weird bills come up. When you just follow the paper trail, and make your voice known. Either as a group here, as part of the Liberty Forum, or individually, or both. Something I've done a lot of now is started to merge with some of the bigger influencers I work closely with on public land grabs, the recent public land sale, the eliminating the roadless rule in deep national forests, of taking what's left of our pristine wildlands, wildlife, and waterways in the nation. It's not just the cannabis, illegal cannabis destroying that and the cartels. It's people with very selfish motivations to take what the public should hold on to. We in America are the only nation, the only continent in the world that can go out on public land and do what anybody wants to do. We can hunt legally, we can camp, we can ride horses, we can ride UTVs, we can hike, we can backpack. Go to any other country and try to hunt, and you're going to pay to play. You're going to pay for an animal to hunt from a very wealthy landowner that is his private property or her private property. America has so much more that the rest of the country doesn't have. And anybody of any demographic can enjoy the great outdoors. And I know they've been the biggest healer for me. They've been the biggest spiritual connection to God to me, honestly. That's where I analyze my crossroads, is being out there as much time as I possibly can. The other thing about our natural resources and our wildlands is just the healing they bring, like I'm talking about. During the COVID era, especially in the urban areas where there was suicide, there was depression, a lot of drug abuse, a lot of alcoholism, and then people started to go out and recreate where they never did before. They walked a lake when they could get out of the house. They decided the grid might go down. I'm watching what's happening to our country right now. We may not have food to eat. I'm totally anti-gun. I never wanted to kill an animal, but I think I want to get an online hunter safety certificate here in the state of wherever, and I'm going to go try to get a gun, and I'm going to get ammo because I might have to feed my family, and I'm going to be self-sufficient. And that was like not necessarily a first choice, but all of a sudden we had people in our world of conservation starting to realize, well, it wasn't just a necessity to survive. I'm starting to feel more empowered and less helpless. Yeah. So I truly believe Mother Nature is a healer. And I know it even says it in the Bible, Genesis 1:25-28, right? We will be stewards of our land. We will protect our wildlife resources. We won't exploit them. This is from God himself.
Yes.
And it's ungodly if we destroy.
Yes.
And we don't protect and we don't manage sensibly. It doesn't mean we can't impact, but it means we have to impact sensibly so we keep it for the next generation. So I think America has more than any other country, and I've hunted and been fortunate to travel all over the world, and I come back here to the Silicon Valley, or go to especially Silicon Valley, running these ranches and these parks.
Oh, yeah.
It's home.
It's the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
That's what's amazing.
I could be having the worst day, watching the stuff I got to report on and wanting to go back operational and, go hike, take the rifle for a walk, and just breathe.
Yes.
It's a healer. And
Amen.
I think if we impact that on our youth guys, even more so, especially the kids in these urban areas, it's going to have a lasting impact. And what makes America so great, why I'm proud and very blessed, and I feel very grateful to be an American and to be from California right here with you guys.
Yes. Well, thank you, John. Leaders are those who step up when something is needed. And John saw a need and he filled that gap that wasn't even necessarily in his job description. So thank you, John, for putting it all on the line and dedicating your life to protect us and the environment. So let's let John's message of courage, creativity, and problem solving and responsibility inspire us all to step up in these days when liberty is needed the most.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Please like and subscribe to our channel to get updates on new speakers, and consider joining the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. You can do so at our website. If you don't want to join, but want to support the principles of American liberty, you can make a tax-deductible donation via our website. The links are in the description. Thank you again, and stay free.